force of elite American troops on board Black Hawk helicopters strike into the heart of the city of Mogadishu, Somalia.
We were invincible, we were Superman, and these were the Captain Kirks of Army aviation.
Their task, to abduct two sidekicks of a brutal Somali warlord.
We just came out of nowhere and dropped into the city.
This Special Forces mission is supposed to last less than an hour. But the operation spirals out of control.
We got a Black Hawk down! We got a Black Hawk down!
And then everything changed. Then it became a whole nother mission.
Thousands of Somalis surround the troops trapped inside enemy territory.
Once that Black Hawk crashed, it was immense. It was a mob.
The Americans launch a rescue mission that will push them to the limit.
The hornet's nest, so to speak, had been stirred up and we were receiving fire at every intersection.
The battle would become the legend of Black Hawk Down. On the east coast of Africa lies the country of Somalia. Its capital city, Mogadishu. It is about to witness one of the bloodiest chapters in its history. US forces are launching a raid into a slum neighborhood near the city's Bakara market. On board the helicopters are the elite Special Forces unit, Task Force Ranger. Their mission, to capture and extract two henchmen of a suspected war criminal.
It was pretty simple. To get in, capture the targets, and to get out. If the leadership of the country said, this is what we want you guys to go do, that's what I wanted to go do.
For the young American soldiers, it's just another day at the office.
We were certainly mentally prepared for it, and we were certainly ready for whatever that they could throw at us.
We went where we wanted to go, and there wasn't anyone there that could tell us or make us do otherwise. There simply wasn't.
24 Pakistani UN.
3 miles away at the American headquarters, senior officers are directing the raid. Heading up Task Force Ranger is two-star General William Garrison.
William Garrison was an expert infantryman. He had served in the airborne. He had been an advisor in Vietnam.
Garrison has fought battles all over the world for nearly 3 decades.
General Garrison was a very much well-respected in the field of special forces.
Despite his men's confidence, Garrison is experienced enough to know this mission is full of risk. He's sending Task Force Ranger into one of the most dangerous cities in the world. But if it succeeds, he will strike a blow against one of the most ruthless men in Somalia, Mohammed Farah Aidid. Aidid hits the headlines in 1992 when he tries to seize control of a famine-ravaged Somalia. A United Nations relief force, including American troops, arrives to help feed the starving millions. But Aidid's clan attempt to control the supply of food.
Food was power. Clans would raid food convoys, take food, distribute it onto their own members. This then forced the United Nations to look at security measures.
Aidid's men massacre 24 UN peacekeepers. It makes him a wanted man. But Aidid just disappears.
General Aidid had basically gone underground. And so some of the thoughts of Task Force Ranger was, if we can't get a deed, let's look for the lieutenants.
Garrison has intelligence that two of Aid's most trusted associates have been spotted in Mogadishu. These are the men that Task Force Ranger have been sent in to snatch.
If you could cut off those leaders, then that would make it very tough for Aid.
Garrison's Task Force Ranger seems perfect for this extraction mission. At its heart are the Rangers, the US Army's elite light infantry. Fighting alongside them are highly trained helicopter teams and members of the secretive Special Forces unit, Delta Force.
Delta is arguably the best in the world of special operations. So when we're engaging what we considered gangs or street-level thugs, the battle was ours to lose.
The assault force of 160 men knows exactly what's expected of them. The mission has been planned to the finest detail. It is supposed to last less than an hour.
Speed and surprise was the most important elements of any of these raids.
Delta operators will land on the target building in Little Bird helicopters, storm inside and arrest Aid's men. At the same time, Ranger units known as Chalks will rope in from Black Hawk helicopters. Chalks 1, 2, 3, and 4 will each secure a corner of the building and form a defensive perimeter. A convoy will drive to the target building, pick up the prisoners and the assault team, and bring them back to base. The operation will be monitored live from Garrison's headquarters. Video cameras mounted on helicopters follow the men as they go into action. By mid-afternoon, the airborne assault force has maneuvered above the target building. On board, Rangers Kenny Thomas and Randy Romalia prepare to fast rope in.
Very orchestrated and very rehearsed. Kick the rope out and then everybody just starts going. And it's a very fast and very efficient way to get people out.
We just came out of nowhere and dropped into the city. And it was almost that calm before the storm.
The Rangers secure the area around the target building. Inside, the Delta team move in on Aid's men. It's no contest.
It took Delta Force about 15 minutes or so to get everybody secured.
The raid is going like clockwork.
They brought all the guys out of the building and we were like, yes, we scored. Like we knew we had done a good thing. So that left us on the target, waiting for our ride.
With the exception of one injured private, the Special Operations mission is a massive success.
It was another Sunday drive home that you would be able to complete the mission and let's go home now, boys.
The Americans and their prisoners begin to load up onto the convoy, but the Somalis are quickly amassing forces. Chalk 3, the Ranger unit including Kenny Thomas and Randy Romalia, are waiting near the target building. Soon, they are taking fire.
Started with one weapon being fired at you from one direction to multiple directions.
but it really wasn't that bad at that point. The reason it wasn't bad is because they were missing.
But as Kenny discovers, the Somalis are becoming more accurate.
I was on a knee firing down the road, and it hit me right here. Bam, it just knocked me backwards.
And I looked over, and Kenny is holding a magazine and shaking.
I thought the thing was gonna blow up or something. So I'm pulling the magazine. I looked over across the street, and Randy's over there. He's like almost laughing at me because he must have looked silly to him.
And the magazine kept that round from going through and hitting him in the chest. The center mass shot on Kenny.
And there's a perfect hole in it, and then on the back side, the whole back end of it's blown out. And you're like, wow, it's a game of inches, you know?
Every second the Americans spend in the danger zone gives the Somalis time to bring in more militiamen. And they have a lethal surprise for Task Force Ranger.
I looked up and I saw the black smoke coming from the tail section of the Black Hawk, and it went into a spin.
It looked odd. Like it shouldn't be flying like that. In the back of your mind, you knew that it was going down.
I heard it impact.
We got a Black Hawk crash in the city. Black Hawk crash in the city.
We're just waiting to go home when the first helicopter got shot down, and then everything changed. Then it became a whole nother mission.
The Somalis near the crash site swarmed towards the injured men of the downed helicopter.
You saw masses of people blocks away from us moving in that direction.
At his headquarters, Garrison and his team watch the disaster unfold. Among his staff is Ranger Larry Moores.
It was very busy, especially once the helicopter crashed in the city. Everybody's anxiety goes up a notch. We are very focused on how can we evacuate everybody from the city.
The two pilots are dead, but there are some survivors at the site.
Now General Garrison has to react. He has to now put in forces. This is a major concern because where the shoot-down occurred.
The situation is all the more difficult because the helicopter has crashed deep inside hostile territory.
Task Force Ranger is in an urban area that might be very difficult to get forces in and conversely get forces out.
Garrison orders another helicopter to drop medics and snipers onto the crash site. But that just buys time. He will also have to divert the convoy that's loaded up with the prisoners to pick up the survivors. But no one knows how long the convoy will take to arrive. He mobilizes the Rangers and Delta operators that are still on the ground near the target building. They follow orders to move to the crash site and form a protective cordon as soon as they can. Chalk 3 with Randy Romalia and Kenny Thomas are just 500 yards away from the crash site.
And immediately you knew you would run to help them. That would be your immediate reaction. Go help them. You see the bird coming down, we gotta go.
But Task Force Ranger's raid has already stirred up a hornet's nest.
So you have a whole mobilized city that could potentially be used against you at the crash site.
There was a sense of urgency for sure because you could see people moving down on the side streets heading towards the crash. So it was a foot race.
It's now their Ranger training kicks in.
Each man goes up to the wall, up to the corner, and you run across, one at a time.
It's shoot, move, communicate, put your guys in a position where they can get an effective field of fire, identify the bad guys. It was very automatic. We all knew what we needed to do.
As the American troops move close to the crash site, the fire intensifies.
I heard like a shrieking yell, and I looked over and I saw a Delta operator. His head flipped back and he just fell. It was probably the shortest, most violent thing I've ever witnessed. You remembered that we really viewed Delta as supermen. The only thing they didn't have were capes. So to see him shot and dropped like that was very sobering.
When people start going down and you see how matter-of-fact the death is, you realize, oh, well, if I die here, I die here. But I'm not gonna let it happen to the guys around me. Man, we weren't fighting for the flag, and we weren't fighting for freedom. At this point, you're fighting for each other. That's it. And that's when I turned around and went back and I was like, hey, you guys take care of each other. We're gonna make it out of here. That's the only way we're gonna make it out of here.
Kenny and Randy's unit continue to fight their way towards the Americans at the crash site, but they're still a block away. All the while, the Somalis are gaining in confidence and numbers.
Be advised, we're coming under heavy fire.
At headquarters, General Garrison gets more bad news. The convoy that's been diverted towards the crash site has run into trouble.
Down here, ASAP.
Unfortunately, because of problems with direction, the convoy actually became lost within the city. Then add on people shooting at you, add on blockades of roads. It becomes a very difficult job.
Garrison realizes it will take far longer than he thought to get the convoy to the men at the crash site. He will have to use helicopters to support them for now, and this is risky. Somalis lie in wait with rocket-propelled grenades all over the city. A half-mile away from the crash site, a second Black Hawk is targeted. Garrison and his team watch in horror as the second helicopter goes down.
We got another helicopter down. We need combat search and rescue.
When the second one went in, it just ramped up the intensity.
Again, there are survivors. One of them is the Black Hawk's pilot, Mike Durant.
Whatever it took, whatever force we needed to put together, we were going to do that and bring everybody back off of the objectives.
Another Black Hawk ropes in 2 Delta snipers to protect Durant and his crew. They are quickly surrounded. The 2 Black Hawks have crashed half a mile away from each other, making the rescue mission even harder. And the convoy is still unable to break through to the first crash site. Half its force is now either wounded or dead.
We kept hearing on the radio the amount of casualties. All I wanted to do was be out there with them and be a part of the effort.
Garrison reaches a devastating decision. The rescue convoy is becoming combat ineffective. He has no choice but to pull them out. Back at the first crash site, Kenny Thomas hears that the convoy is being hauled back to base.
I can't believe it's happened. But the reality of it is that it is happening, And now what are you going to do about it?
Most of the American troops have made it to the roads and alleys surrounding the first crashed Black Hawk. Now, they begin to form a defensive perimeter around the downed aircraft and wounded men.
It was just putting guys in the right vantage points to minimize the amount of fire we were receiving from the enemy.
Kenny and Randy's Chalk 3 take up their positions near a main road. They are surrounded by a baying mob. They have to find a way to hold them off. So they turn to the squad's M60 heavy machine gun.
We needed that M60 there. And we were going to do whatever it took to keep that M60 there.
Enemy fire strikes the M60 gunner. Kenny takes over.
There was these two guys that were just popping their heads up over a little retaining wall. Just popping up and doing the Mogadishu machine gun man, which is not even aiming and just spraying rounds. So I got behind the gun, I waited for those guys to stick their heads up and fired off a couple rounds, like, bap, bap, bap. And then the gun goes click, click, chick, chick, chick. And I'm like, what the? It's out of rounds. Everybody's yelling at me, use the law. And I'm like, what? Because the law. And I had been carrying around this light anti-tank weapon, the law. I'm like, oh, I have a rocket launcher. So we fired it off. And that took down that position.
And that was very effective at dissuading the Somalis from coming back to that corner.
But now, there are fewer than 100 men protecting the crash site. The number of Somalis are steadily growing, and they outnumber the Americans at least 10 to 1. Most of them with close links to Adid's clan.
The Somali clan member believes in clan first and last. They're going to take that to the nth degree, to such an extent that they're willing to die for it.
To make them even more fanatical, some are high on the local drug of choice.
There was some use of an addictive drug called cat. It's almost like being on amphetamine. It's going to provide you that extra oomph or that strength to carry on. You're fighting a tough foe.
We came in with the audacity that we could just kick in doors and take down who we wanted, and they were going to fight back. That's one of the places we went wrong. We completely underestimated their ability to play the game of urban combat.
At the American headquarters, a section of the original convoy struggles back to base. Garrison decides to send it straight back in with reinforcements. Larry Moores gets his chance to fight.
We knew we were going immediately back in, so very difficult to let them know after they'd just been shot up pretty good. Hey, we're heading right back in. There was a nervousness, but there also was a part of the way we do business in the Rangers.
The new convoy rolls out, but the Somalis are ready.
The Somalis had set up a huge roadblock. There was no maneuvering around. We were hit by a high volume of small arms fire to try and keep us from getting up there to that crash site. It was a pretty constant fight.
Larry and his men try to break through, but the whole of the city is now against them.
The hornet's nest, so to speak, had been stirred up, and we were receiving fire at every intersection. We knew that it was going to be a fight that day.
Larry's convoy is held up in the middle of the city, still short of the second crash site, and even further from the men on the ground at crash site 1. The news of the convoy's slow progress comes through to the men surrounded there.
I could hear the radio transmissions. And I remember we start looking at each other with concern, because we had never been on the ground this long, and the convoy had never received this amount of fire. That was where I really felt, I believe, discouraged.
At his base, General Garrison can see his vehicles cannot find a way through the city's streets. Eventually, he realizes he has no choice but to pull them back to base for a second time.
It must have been a most difficult decision for him, because he knew that potentially if he did nothing to save those individuals, he would have another repeat of maybe a massacre. Conversely, he had to weigh the risk of having even more casualties.
Reluctantly, the men in the convoy follow General Garrison's orders.
From my perspective, I wanted to fight into the objective, but from a leadership perspective, they're making a command and control decision. Do we really want to insert more Humvees who can't support themselves for a long fight? We just create a bigger problem.
The surrounded men of the crash sites are no nearer to being rescued. Night falls on Mogadishu. It's been just 3 hours since the mission began. Near the first crash site, Kenny and Randy defend their positions against the mob in the darkness.
They would fire randomly to try to see your muzzle flash. And then at that point, once they figured out where you were, they would try to maneuver on you.
The Somalis have a critical advantage. They know every inch of ground.
Remember, these are their neighborhoods. They're not our neighborhoods.
The Americans realize they stand no chance on the city's streets.
The thing that obviously made sense, and the Delta guys had already done this, was kick in a door, take over the house, and that's what we needed to do.
The men move inside and steel themselves for a long night ahead. By now, many of the men of Task Force Ranger are regretting not bringing an essential piece of kit into the battle.
We didn't anticipate being on the ground this long. A lot of us didn't bring night vision.
Basically, we got complacent because we were happy not to carry more gear. But we learned it's better to have and not need than to need and not have.
The Americans could have seen their enemy in near total darkness with their night vision goggles. Without them, the Somalis can close in.
The fighting along the crash site is very close combat. It's almost eye to eye, tooth to tooth.
The Americans are now fighting for their lives. At headquarters, General Garrison has already seen his operation descend into chaos. Not only are the men still trapped at the first crash site, but at the second crash site, all the men are either dead or captured. Desperate to salvage something, Garrison concentrates on the first crash site before it's too late. The only way to get his men out is to launch another convoy. But having failed twice, Garrison begins to realize he now needs support from other United Nations troops in Somalia.
How do you get the forces out? Well, you had to rely on something else. That something else were armored vehicles to break through those blockades and to protect the convoy. Who could provide that? It would only be the UN.
Getting this multinational force together will take time. It's something that the men on the ground may not have. Back at the first crash site, the men of Chalk 3 are reaching their lowest ebb.
I was exhausted at this point, and I got against the wall and I just slid onto the floor. And it looked like the floor was wet, and it was. It was wet from blood. You could actually smell the blood in the room. Once I realized I was sitting in it, I was tired enough to where I didn't even care to move. And then I remember picturing the White House at night, just like we've all seen on the news, where it's all lit up in white light at night, beautiful. And I remember thinking, no matter what decision is made there right now, there is nothing that can be done to help us. And that was very sobering, knowing that you're part of the greatest fighting force in the world, and no matter what decision is made at the highest level of government, there is nothing that can be done to help you in that particular situation, or in time to help get you out of that situation.
The Americans are paying the price for their overconfidence before the mission. They are now lacking more than just night goggles.
So at this point in the night, it was quite clear that we were running out of stuff.
They are low on ammunition, food, water, and medical supplies. At Chalk 3's position, one of their men is bleeding to death. They desperately need more morphine and IV bags. They have to be resupplied. Garrison faces another crucial decision. He has already lost 2 Black Hawks in the city, but a helicopter drop is the only way he can resupply his men.
Doing nothing is not an option. So he takes the responsibility. I have to send a helicopter out there to drop supplies, and that's what he does.
Garrison orders the launch of another Black Hawk helicopter. The pilot will need to be guided in by the men on the ground.
You have to land those supplies in a certain area where you can get access to them. You land on the wrong place, then all you're doing is giving supplies to the Somalis.
The mission's success depends on an infrared strobe carried by the American troops. Invisible to the Somalis, this small device's signal allows the pilot to spot the landing zone using his night vision sights. At the crash site, the men prepare for the drop.
This is Super 66 calling in for radio check over. Reading you loud and clear.
The Rangers talk the helicopter in until the pilot can spot the strobe.
Okay, watch my altitude. It's 100 feet into the wind. Altitude's good. Okay, that's 75 feet, and you're in a good position.
It looks like it's going to plan. Then, a hail of fire.
Taking small arms fire! Taking small arms fire!
He just had to sit there, hover, and take it. He knows that bird's getting hit, man. Ting, 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 ting. You know, and he has to sit there and take it because he knows there's guys counting on him. It's not about like, I don't know, man, it's pretty hairy. I don't want to go in there. What? Are you kidding me? That's not how it works.
The Black Hawk just manages to stay in the air and makes the drop. The Rangers receive their lifeline.
Well, the bird was hovering right over the building, so they just kicked him out, and it was, you know, much needed supplies that you could argue kept one of our guys alive. You know, he was going low on fluids. They didn't have anything else to keep his body from collapsing, and without IVs, he wouldn't have made it.
The Black Hawk struggles back to base riddled with bullets. The men on the ground can hold out a while longer, but they need General Garrison to find them a way out. At his headquarters, Garrison has had a breakthrough. Other UN forces have agreed to let him use their tanks and armored personnel carriers in the next convoy.
The Malaysians and the Pakistanis were committed to going in with us, which we give them a lot of credit for. They didn't have any trapped personnel on that objective, but they accepted that role to go out there with us and fight all night.
This heavily armored, multinational convoy will leave from Newport and head into the city. Half of the force will steer towards the second crashed helicopter to blow it up. They want to make sure its high-tech weaponry doesn't fall into enemy hands. The rest will push north towards the surrounded men at the first crash site. The rescue convoy moves out, 8 hours after the original raid was launched. Once again, Larry Moores is going in.
Anybody that was able to go out and fight that night, we took with us. So there was some intel analysts, there was a couple of wounded rangers who were able to take a cast off their arm because they wanted to be part of the mission.
Corporal Robert Lawhead, a Humvee driver assigned to the 10th Mountain Division, joins the rescue effort.
It didn't matter if it were Special Operations, Rangers, or even the 10th Mountain Division. It was just, we had people in trouble. And at that point, we knew it was us against the country. We didn't have time to think about it. We just did it.
The convoy battles towards the surrounded men. Again, the Somalis are ready.
It was a major firefight from block to block.
They were running out in the street, taking pot shots at us. You could look up on the roof or into a window and see them shooting. You would see guys get shot right in front of you. It was chaos.
This multinational force has never trained together, and the result is confusion.
As people start driving toward the crash site, the first two Malaysian armored vehicles get hit by RPGs.
Under heavy fire, the Malaysians head off in the wrong direction, causing more delay. At the first crash site, the waiting troops are feeling the strain.
There was no mistaking where that convoy was because the exchange of gunfire was unbelievable.
The rescue operation is less than half a mile away, but it may as well be on the other side of Africa.
And the radio is like, they're en route. They're not en route. They're en route. They're not en route. You know, at some point you just gave up.
The convoy battles through the night for nearly 3 hours.
If you can imagine people on the rooftops and in the alleyways and every door shooting at you, that's what they were trying to get through.
Finally, it breaks through.
I believe at that point we thought it was pretty much over.
And we were all very tired. And you kind of get the sense, okay, well, this thing's finally done. We can get our wounded guys out of here.
The men at the crash site load up their casualties and prepare to head off. Everybody thinks they're about to go home. But General Garrison has one final challenge for them. The Ranger Creed dictates the Americans can't leave a man behind. He wants his men to bring the body of the pilot of the crashed helicopter home.
This was something we had to do. It was the right thing. It was not a question that we were going to leave the body behind.
But the body is still trapped inside the crushed cockpit, and it will take time to free it. The delay could mean they lose the cover of darkness.
It became a fight against time, dismantling that aircraft to remove him, to bring him home with us.
Robert Lawhead's Humvee is called into action to try and free the body from the wreckage.
We would start attaching the tow strap to parts of the helicopter to try to pull, different parts of the frame apart so we could get more free access to the body.
The delay gives the Somalis more time to attack. In the house, Randy and Kenny's nerves are becoming shredded.
Why is it not happening? That's what you want to know. Let's get it done. Ricky Tick, come on. We were all very antsy, yeah, and the bad guys are starting to shoot again.
It was definitely the longest night in my life.
After 3.5 hours, the rescue team finally recovers the dead pilot's body. Only then can they head home.
We're getting the hell out of here. I don't care what's in front of us.
The convoy now has to fight through a heavily defended maze of streets towards a UN-held stadium in the north of the city. Worse, there's not enough vehicles for all the troops.
At that point, the plan was to run out next to vehicles.
Randy Romalia and Kenny Thomas now have to run a gauntlet of enemy fire. And they try to use the vehicles as cover.
It was a pretty intense fight still that morning.
It sounded like someone had picked up a handful of pebbles and were throwing it against sheet metal. That tink, 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 which was bullets bouncing off vehicles.
But soon the men on foot are left behind.
We got to the first intersection, and that vehicle didn't stop for us. It kept going.
And I'm a pretty fast guy, but I'm not that fast. They put the pedal down, man, took off. And that left about 30 of us ran from that city.
With their cover gone, Kenny and Randy suddenly find themselves more exposed to enemy fire.
It felt like somebody had walked up and struck me.
Looked like somebody hit him with a baseball bat on the shoulder, like he just kind of did this thing.
So once I realized I had been shot, I reached into my body armor to check for an exit wound. And I started breathing in and out deeply, expecting to hear a gurgling. Lungs were still intact, I could still move, I could still breathe, which was of relief. But I knew that I was okay enough to keep moving forward.
Eventually, Kenny and Randy managed to scramble on board UN vehicles. Half an hour later, the convoy finally forces its way back to the safety of the UN-held stadium. Task Force Rangers' 14-hour ordeal is over.
As our task force came back together, it was a very emotional sight.
You know, when you look at each other, you don't have to say anything, because you know you gave it everything you could.
That was the first time I felt safe. But the reality of what had just taken place was starting to set in.
And the emotion just comes out of you. And I remember I started tearing up. And Randy walked up to me and he was asking me if I was okay. Like, he was worried about me, and he was the guy with a hole on his back. But at that time, it was enough to know he was alive, because I knew by then, we had lost guys. And I knew it was a big deal.
General Garrison now counts the cost of the mission. 18 Americans, 1 Malaysian peacekeeper, and 500 Somalis are dead. Worse still, the bodies of the crew from the second crash site are mutilated and dragged through the streets in front of video cameras. Garrison would later write to President Clinton, saying full responsibility rested with him and not in Washington. The situation gets worse. The Somalis broadcast images of the captured helicopter pilot, Michael Durant.
Michael Durant was held captive.
11 days after the raid, he is released. But the humiliation causes outrage in the US. In March 1994, US troops withdraw from Somalia. A year later, the UN also pulls out. In the years since the Black Hawk Down mission, the men who fought in Somalia remain proud of what they achieved. Adid's 2 sidekicks were both captured alive.
We were there to accomplish a mission, and we did accomplish the mission. Yeah, we got our nose bloodied in the fight, but we won the fight.
The men of Task Force Ranger did everything they could to bring their comrades home. Their fighting spirit will ensure this operation will go down in Special Forces history.
You know that you had every opportunity to step out of the fight, but nobody did, because they were fighting for each other, because they knew if they stepped out of it, it would leave someone hanging. And you weren't going to do that to your Ranger buddies. You weren't going to do it to anybody. And that feeling sticks with you for life.
A group of heavily armed terrorists storm an embassy compound. It quickly becomes a siege.
These were man-eaters. They were used to killing.
The attackers have captured senior politicians, generals, and a host of VIPs. They will hold them for over 100 days. For the Special Forces, a frontal assault is impossible. Instead, they must do something radical. Attack from underground.
It was never going to be anything but a military solution.
At stake are the lives of 72 hostages. This is the extraordinary story of how Peruvian commandos ended one of the longest terrorist sieges in history. In the capital of Peru's upmarket diplomatic quarter, there's only one place to be seen: the Japanese ambassador's residence. 450 guests are sipping champagne and making small talk.
It was a big diplomatic bash.
All are prominent people from Peru's political landscape.
Lots of guests.
Among them are diplomats, businessmen, and members of the Peruvian president's family. As well as this man, Admiral Luis Giampietri, a senior figure in Peru's intelligence services.
There were a lot of army and police, so there were a lot of fancy uniforms and there was a lot of gold braid.
British journalist Sally Bowen is also there.
There's a great deal of whiskey being grabbed off trays from waiters as they went around.
The most senior person is Francisco Tudela.
When I was foreign minister, I had to go and pay my respects because it was the birthday of the emperor, Japan's national day.
The building is a fortress, well protected, with blast-proof doors and windows. A 12-foot-high wall surrounds the complex. A ring of policemen and sentries protect entrances and exits. Security is the last thing on their minds. But a small team of terrorists are preparing a bold mission. They plan to sneak through the security cordon hidden in the back of an ambulance. As the guests tuck into their wine and canapes, little do they know what's in store. At 8:30 p.m., the heavily armed terrorists place a charge on the outer wall.
Suddenly there was an explosion.
It sounded a little like a car bomb. Kind of materialized in our midst. We couldn't really understand what was going on.
They were very well equipped. 4 of them had Uzi machine guns, Browning pistols, hand grenades.
The terrorists open fire on the guards outside the building. Guests dive for cover.
It was just firing all around.
There was gunfire both from outside the residence and some of the gunmen arrived in our midst.
Of course, I was trying to protect my wife, and why not say the truth, protect myself.
I hit the ground. The shooting intensified. Various people had run underneath the tables. It was very scary.
As soon as the gunfire subsides, the terrorists turn on their captives.
They were very hard on us. They kicked us, they aimed their guns at us, and they pistol whipped us.
In Lima, news reaches the most powerful man in the land, Peru's president, Alberto Fujimori. 450 people are under the control of 14 terrorists. Fujimori has based his whole career on defeating terrorism.
This was 1996, and in theory, Peru was pacified. This is what Fujimori had been telling everybody for a long time, for some 3 years.
Between 1980 and 1990, an estimated 35,000 people had been killed in Peru's bloody anti-terror wars, particularly against the notorious Shining Path.
The terrorism initiated by the Shining Path in the 1980s and 1990s was a threat to our country. It endangered our very existence. They were on the verge of taking power.
For a man elected because he could defeat terrorism, this incident spells political disaster. The attack on a Japanese target also has a special resonance. Fujimori is of Japanese descent.
The Japanese were targeted because they were seen to have been giving help and support and a lot of financial assistance to Fujimori and the regime.
But at this stage, Alberto Fujimori doesn't know how to respond. He desperately needs more information. For a start, who are the terrorists and what do they want? At the Japanese ambassador's residence, military hostages rip off their insignia and rank and desperately attempt to hide their identity. Outside, the authorities try to shoot their way in again.
Gunfire went on for 20-25 minutes.
They lob in tear gas. But the rebels have come prepared.
So they took out their gas masks and put them on, and they were fine.
The tear gas subsides.
The rebel with the megaphone started shouting that he wanted the Japanese ambassador to stand up and identify himself. And I think I, and certainly some people around me, were quite nervous at that point because we had a horrible feeling that the ambassador was going to be executed in front of our eyes.
The Japanese ambassador, Morihisa Aoki, is forced to get on a megaphone. He pleads with the police to fall back, and a tense calm follows. In Alberto Fujimori's operations room, the president begins to appraise the situation. He calls for a trusted aide, Vladimiro Montesinos, head of Peru's National Intelligence Service, or NIS. A trained lawyer, he once defended Fujimori in court against charges of corruption. Now, he's his right-hand man, the president's Mr. Fix-It.
We all were very much aware of the existence of Vladimiro Montesinos, but he was never ever seen. He wielded extraordinary power. He was Fujimori's eyes and ears.
Montesinos calls upon an elite counter-terrorist unit, the Peruvian Commandos.
The Peruvian commandos are always training for any threat to the nation.
Para cualquier contingencia que pudiera presentársele a la nación, ¿no?
Close quarter battle, intelligence gathering, and heliborne assault are just some of their skills.
Parachuting, amphibious warfare, mountain warfare, hostage rescue, storming buildings, as well as marksmanship.
General Jose Williams Zapata and Luis Alatrista Rodriguez soon receive a call from Montesinos.
I was working in the 1st Special Forces Brigade. The television showed us what was happening at the Japanese ambassador's residence. We could see that there was a considerable problem. My reaction was to order my officers and men to get ready for action.
Montesinos and the commandos begin to discuss the options.
We rejected the possibility of an air attack using parachutists, hang gliders, or other forms of approach because we would lose the element of surprise. the secrecy. That wasn't possible.
No era posible.
Generals Williams Zapata and Alatrista Rodriguez will have to find another way. Meanwhile, at the ambassador's residence, the rebels are digging in. They place booby traps in doorways and around the grounds. They turn the building into a fortress. Only now do they reveal their identities.
One of the rebels, who was quite close to me, picked up a loud hailer and shouted, "Keep your heads down or they'll be blown off." This is the MRTA.
The MRTA, the Tupac Amaru Revolutionary Movement, are hardline communist rebels infamous in Peru.
The MRTA was specialized in kidnapping. They were ruthless and had killed a lot of people.
They kidnapped several businessmen to extort money from their families. They also carried out assassinations.
The terrorist commanding the raid is also the group's leader, Nestor Serpa Catalini. Born in Lima in the 1950s, Serpa is a former political radical who has taken up arms.
He was a psychopath. He was a very bloodthirsty guy.
Serpa's hope is that seizing the hostages will bring the movement publicity. He identifies the English journalist Sally Bowen as someone who could be useful to him.
He was very calm and collected. He was in a small study off the hallway of the residence. We asked him what he was about, what he was doing this for, and he immediately came out with the demand that MRTA political prisoners had to be freed.
Serpa demands the release of 400 political prisoners, including his own lover, and he demands a great deal of money.
They asked for a ransom of $6 million and the wholesale change of the country's economic model. They were blackmailing the government.
Serpa also wants to meet the president. If his demands aren't met, he'll kill hostages. The first person in his sights is Foreign Minister Francisco Tudela.
The leader told me that they were going to kill me the next day at 12 o'clock.
Tudela has just 14 hours to live.
I told my wife, I'm a dead man. And she said, don't talk nonsense. But I said, yes, the odds are against me. I was a major target for the terrorists.
Luckily, one of the hostages steps in. Michel Minig is a negotiator from the Red Cross with experience of various war zones.
I think he probably felt that the ambassador might need some support. I was very relieved to see Michel Minig get up.
Very quickly, Minig persuades the captors to release some hostages.
And I think he did an amazing job that night. Michel made it clear to Serpa, the rebel commander, that he would do his cause a lot of good if he broadly respected the rules of warfare.
Minig secures the release of the waiters, and then the women and children, in all 170 people. Among them, the wife of Foreign Minister Francisco Tudela.
She didn't want to leave me. And I said, you have to go. Think of the children. I had small children at the time. And so she reluctantly left the room. but it was very emotional. It was very difficult.
Sally Bowen is also one of those released.
We shook hands and then he said, "Good evening." So out we went and left the residence. When the door opened, suddenly there was this battery of cameras and people shouting and asking questions.
Sally Bowen is given the task of announcing to the world's press the MRTA leader's demands. Other hostages make it clear that any attempt to storm the building would be insane. The next day, Fujimori begins a series of meetings with his cabinet. He is adamant that no MRTA prisoners will be released.
Imagine for 1 second that the government had ceded to their demands. The next day, we would have had another group, like Shining Path, that would have done a similar thing. That would have been unthinkable.
Fujimori makes it clear he will never negotiate with a gun to his head. For Francisco Tudela, Fujimori's stance is a death sentence. He is due to be executed at noon. His life hangs in the balance. The deadline comes. Serpa does nothing. But he warns Tudela that he is living on borrowed time.
He said to me, "You know, Foreign Minister, I admire your work, but I have to kill you."
In fact, a few hours later, 4 more hostages are released by Serpa, all of them diplomats. Meanwhile, preparations to retake the ambassador's residence are continuing. Thanks to the released hostages, the commandos are getting valuable intelligence. They learn of the enemy's strength and positions.
We knew there were 14 terrorists, that they had all come in with heavy weapons, they had rocket-propelled grenades. They had prepared for this operation and they knew exactly what to bring.
They study a scale model of the complex, looking for a way in. A frontal attack is out of the question. The only way forward is to do something truly radical.
Approaching from above ground was immensely challenging because of the explosives. So that's how we came to the idea of approaching from below, by tunnels, from below ground.
Operation Chavín is born. The name refers to a Peruvian archaeological site known for its network of tunnels. The plan is to dig into the compound at a depth of 3 meters. Nothing like this has ever been attempted before. The main tunnel will be 20 meters long, with other tunnels feeding outwards. It will take at least a month to dig from the nearby buildings to reach the objective. They can't use heavy machinery, as the sound could tip off the terrorists. The largest tools will be electric pickaxes. Over the coming days, the operation begins. For now, though, Serpa Catalini seems to be enjoying himself. In late December, as a gesture of seasonal goodwill, he releases more people, 225 in all, in the hope of grabbing the headlines.
For a long time, one felt that the guerrillas were winning the propaganda war. They seemed to be more open and ready to talk than the Peruvian government. There was absolute hermetic silence from the Peruvian government.
Whilst the authorities keep their cards close to their chest, the terrorists revel in all their newfound fame.
They had a very good sense for publicity. They knew that photographers and camera people needed images. The MRTA would hang banners out of the window periodically. It was all part of the propaganda war.
15 days into the siege, on New Year's Day 1997, the MRTA pull off an astonishing propaganda coup.
There was the famous incident when we finally managed to get permission for some of the photographers and camera people to file past the residence so at least they could get some images of the exterior. The front door opened and a Serpa invited everybody in. So they all went in and had their photo opportunities with the guerrillas.
I spoke to the foreign press when they came into the embassy on New Year's Day. He tried to sell this idea that they were fair combatants, that they were guerrillas that respected the Geneva Conventions.
Despite appearing to be reasonable, the siege drags on. For those unlucky enough to remain inside, life settles into a strange routine. Mostly boredom is the biggest enemy. Hostages take turns to give talks on different subjects. Some run the corridors to keep fit. Others do chores, like cleaning.
First comes surprise, fear, anguish, and anger. But then there comes a moment when you start to assimilate it all and you learn to live with it. And all you want is for it to end, one way or the other.
At night, the hostages have to sleep on the floor. It is cold, cramped, airless.
It's hard to sleep in this way. We found it hard to get used to it.
For Admiral Giampietri, nighttime is a chance to reflect.
It was a chance to be alone with your thoughts. There was silence. You could reconstruct the events of the day.
Occasionally, the terrorists show their true colors. Something Francisco Tudela experiences.
You had two terrorists by your side, pointing their guns at your head. They pulled the trigger. You hear clack, the empty chamber. And that's a moment in which you have a mixture of fear and relief.
Four weeks in, 72 hostages remain inside. But with none of Serpa's demands met, the siege is stuck in stalemate. For the terrorist leader, the lack of progress is unsettling. The stress starts to get to him.
he had sharp changes in his mood. He became overexcited and violent. And then, after a few hours, he would lie down and sleep. Then he would wake up and feel anguish, put his hands in his face, go to a window to breathe, and then the cycle would begin again and he would become again violent.
It is also a troubling time for President Alberto Fujimori. Outwardly, he too seems to be making little progress. So he tries something new. Troop carriers and heavy guns are brought in, and loud music is played around the embassy. It's a well-known trick of psychological warfare, designed to shred the nerves of those inside.
This was one of the greatest tortures for us. The noise was extraordinary. We couldn't talk amongst ourselves because the noise was so loud.
But all this has a reason: to conceal the digging.
Se colocó música.
Loud music was played with the aim of distracting the terrorists.
Estuvieran distraídos en ello.
When we were nearby, we made noise, put music on, so they couldn't hear the work that was going on underground.
As a further distraction, Fujimori seems to be stepping up the action on the diplomatic front.
There was Fujimori dashing off on missions to negotiate possible asylum.
His team of negotiators liaises daily with the hostage takers.
Without doubt, none of us wanted a military operation. We preferred a solution that would allow us to get out alive.
Fujimori travels to London to see if Britain will give the MRTA asylum.
The whole situation was very confused. There seemed to be activity on a different range of levels.
But this diplomatic front is a ploy to hide what's really going on. The digging is nearing the target. And anyone who knows Fujimori is in no doubt as to his real intentions.
I knew my government, I knew President Fujimori. It was not only a decision of President Fujimori, it was a decision of a country that had suffered during more than a decade of horrendous terrorist attacks.
All the while, underground, the miners are moving ever closer to their objective. It is just a matter of time. In April, almost 4 months into the siege, Serpa makes a concession to break the deadlock. He drops the number of MRTA prisoners he wants released from 400 to just 20. By now, it's nearing summer. The temperature outside hits 26 degrees. For the captors and their hostages inside, the long siege starts to take its toll. The Peruvian authorities have turned off the water and electricity. Conditions are getting rank.
Off. No running water, no electricity, no hygiene.
With the water turned off, the toilets back up.
The bathrooms soon broke down. Many people had loose bowels. The smell was overpowering.
But the awful conditions are part of the army plan. It forces the terrorists to rely on supplies from the outside.
This was deliberate, to control the flow of supplies into the building.
The only source of provisions and fresh water is the Red Cross, which makes regular deliveries to those inside.
So the members of the International Red Cross would ferry food in and out every day. So they went in and out of the residence on a daily basis.
What nobody knows, not even the Red Cross, is that the aid packages contain something else. The authorities have hidden high-tech gadgetry in the deliveries. And they are intended for one man, Admiral Luis Giampietri. Amongst the board games, religious artifacts, books, and even musical instruments are tiny microphones and cameras. Specialist technicians from Peru's intelligence services have custom-built tiny eavesdropping devices.
The intelligence service provided microphones that were being smuggled in, concealed in different objects, in a guitar, in some books, the provisions. In this way, they could listen to information, get it down on paper, and then pass it to us so that we could put it to use.
Some of the listening devices are no bigger than a match. The cameras are also minute and contain tiny transmitters. Over the weeks of the siege, an amazing 800 microphones are smuggled in. Admiral Luis Giampietri secretly places them around the residence with the help of others. The microphones aren't just for eavesdropping. They also allow him to communicate with the commandos.
Talking into the microphones was not easy. Maintaining secrecy from all the other hostages was also very difficult. But I had to keep it secret because I didn't know if they agreed with what I was doing.
To conceal what he's doing, he is sent a Bible with a hidden microphone. He starts to read aloud from the pages. The MRTA soon dismiss it as the prayers of a madman. But within each prayer, Giampietri drops in key pieces of intelligence.
We knew that he was ex-Naval Special Forces. He spoke our language. He knew commando terminology. And he was our best contact amongst the hostages.
In their situation room, the commandos listen in as key intelligence is gathered from all the different microphones. Gradually, they start to build up a detailed picture of what is going on.
We listened to the terrorists as well, so we gained more information which would allow us to improve our operation to rescue the hostages.
They learn that at night the rebels are especially vigilant. This is when they most fear an attack. Some sleep amongst the hostages, whilst others rotate guard duties. Giampietri's intelligence also reveals one crucial piece of information. Every afternoon, 4 members of the group play a game of football. The large dining room on the ground floor becomes their pitch. Whenever the rebels play, many of their comrades watch on. This is when they are at their most distracted and vulnerable.
So, if they were all together playing football downstairs in the dining room, we could take them out in one go.
The afternoon football game is clearly the moment to strike. So the commanders adjust their plan. They dig a special tunnel straight under the dining room.
We decided to make a branch from the main tunnel to under the residence where they played football.
In this new tunnel, the commandos will place something special.
From this arose the idea of placing explosives underneath the hall and the dining room, with the intention of taking the majority of the terrorists out. This way, they would have less chance to kill the hostages.
Even if the dining room bomb doesn't kill many terrorists, it will at least achieve something else.
As a secondary objective, obviously an explosion of this nature under a house would create such confusion that they would be disorientated and incapable of reacting.
As 0 hour approaches, the commandos now finalize their plan.
There were to be 2 assault squads. For the ground floor, Team Alpha. For the first floor, Delta Squad.
The group that would do the raid includes Miguel Velez Moras Rojas.
Yo fui integrante del Grupo Delta.
I was part of Group Delta. My section leader was Commander Renan, and I was the 5th man in that team.
Quinto hombre de ese equipo.
150 soldiers rehearse over and over using a life-size replica of the complex. They practice different room-clearing tactics and test different types of explosives.
We tested the exact amount needed. Not too much that it blew up the residents and the hostages. Not too little that it had no effect.
They're nearly ready. Then there's a complication.
The journalists who were virtually living on the rooftops around the embassy became aware that there was a lot of noise from underneath the ground. So we all learned that tunnels were being dug.
Serpa flies into a rage. He threatens the hostages and gathers them all upstairs so they can be killed more quickly in the event of a raid. He breaks off negotiations entirely. What he doesn't realize is that he has just played into Fujimori's hands. By refusing to negotiate and refusing to guarantee the health of the hostages, Serpa has given Fujimori the excuse to act.
The decision was made to carry out the raid and rescue the hostages.
The commandos are finally ready. The tunnels have been dug. Late in April, 126 days since the siege began, the commandos are given the green light.
It was around 3 in the afternoon, a still warm Lima summer afternoon.
A message is sent to Luis Giampietri to make sure the hostages are wearing light-coloured clothing. This will differentiate them from the terrorists in their dark combat fatigues. Giampietri instructs them to lie on the floor and keep their heads down. Francisco Tudela is one of the few who knows what is about to unfold.
I was one of the 5 people who knew of the communications between Admiral Giampietri and the military. And so I knew when the attack was coming.
As the rebels start their afternoon game of football, Admiral Giampietri whispers into his Bible as if praying. He tells the commandos that the guards are distracted. He also transmits the confirmation that he has got all the hostages to wear light clothing. A team is sent to set the charge under the dining room. Just after 3 p.m.,
we made our way in via the main tunnel.
the commandos suddenly emerge.
After months of inaction, bursts of gunfire and smoke appearing from the top of the residence. All this was being transmitted by TV cameras, so it was live on television immediately.
As planned, one force, Alpha, storms downstairs, while the other, Delta, hits the upper floor and seeks out the hostages.
The Delta group was in charge of the second floor, and they entered around the whole perimeter as well. We entered the residence in 6 places at once.
A second wave of commandos attacks the front of the building, while another scales the walls on ladders. More blasts signal the arrival of more elite soldiers as Delta Team assaults the upper floor from the terrace.
They started to evacuate in an orderly fashion.
Bangs, gunfire, hostages scurrying down flights of stairs on the outside, keeping their heads down.
With many of the hostages safe, the commandos move in for the kill. Over the next 15 minutes, they flush out the terrorists. But it's still not over for Francisco Tudela, who remains trapped in his hiding place. One of the terrorists comes looking for him.
The terrorist that was my executor, he looked for me in the room and then saw me in the terrace. He threw a hand grenade. I received 60 pieces of shrapnel. I still have 18. Then he shot me. He failed the first 2 times, but the third time he got me in the leg.
Despite his wounds, Tudela manages to escape.
I recall one stretcher being carried out. I think we almost immediately identified Francisco Tudela, who'd been shot.
I remember that Admiral Giampietri, when he reached that point in the garden, saw me and said, "You are wounded." And I said, "No, we are free." I was exhilarated.
As the smoke clears, all 14 terrorists are dead, including Serpa. Only one hostage doesn't make it out alive. He is wounded and dies from a heart attack. 2 commandos are killed. The whole raid lasts 32 minutes from beginning to end. For President Alberto Fujimori, it is a triumph. In the final act of showmanship, he visits the building. He supervises the removal of the MRTA flags and congratulates his commandos.
This is Fujimori at his most ebullient, having taken a huge gamble and having it come off.
The raid is seen as a great victory. However, if Fujimori and Montesinos thought the raid would make them politically invincible, they were mistaken. Both are now in jail on corruption charges. Nevertheless, The raid remains a source of pride for those who took part.
Every commando aspires to take part in this sort of event. For me, it is a matter of personal pride. We did it for Peru, and I will always be proud to have led this group of men. All Peruvians feel proud of this operation because it was a success, the most successful rescue mission in the world.
The raid sends the message: Peru won't tolerate terrorism.
You should never negotiate with terrorists or give in to their demands. Because of the success of the Chavín to Huántar operation, the Tupac Amaru revolutionary movement was effectively defeated.
Today, Peru is largely free of terrorism and is reaping the benefits, thanks in part. Terrorists hijack a holiday flight full of civilians. They rig the plane with high explosives.
One press of a button, the whole aircraft could be destroyed.
Over the next 6 days, the attackers show no mercy.
They just change the dynamics of the game when you kill an innocent person.
The terrorists seem to hold all the cards.
It's a bad target to attack.
With a massacre just seconds away, the Special Forces team have to go in.
When death comes through the door, all they think about is stopping those people in black coming towards them.
One of the male terrorists appears with 2 hand grenades. These are deadly moments.
The lives of 86 innocent hostages are in the balance. The rescue mission will go down in Special Forces history. Operation Fire Magic. October the 13th, 1977. Lufthansa flight LH-181 takes off from the island of Mallorca. It sets a course over the Mediterranean Sea. On board are 5 crew and 86 passengers.
Flight LH-181 was a typical holiday flight from Palma, Mallorca, back to Frankfurt. People had just enjoyed a good holiday, they were relaxed, they'd had a good time. Nobody could conceive what was about to happen.
As the pilot steers homeward bound towards Germany,
there were 2 terrorists at the back of the plane, 2 terrorists at the front. They're screaming, they're shouting.
The terrorists had pistols and grenades.
The passengers realised instantly this is a hijack situation.
the 4 terrorists herd the passengers to the back of the plane. They want all of the hostages where they can see them.
First thing they want to do is create fear on that plane. They grab a stewardess and they hit so hard that it crushes their face. It showed everybody on the plane that these guys are meaning business.
In the cockpit, Captain Jürgen Schumann and co-pilot Jürgen Viertel are held at gunpoint. They have no choice. they surrender to the terrorists. Captain Schumann is forced to set a course for Rome, Italy. The terrorists are in total control. The leader begins to mock his hostages.
He announced to all the passengers that he had taken over the aircraft and that he was in control. This was a moment of sheer terror for all the passengers. They knew that everything had changed and their lives were on the line now.
The plane is now near the south of France. The flight to Rome will take just over an hour. When the plane touches down, the terrorists radio the Italians in the control tower. Only now do they reveal what they want. The attack is the work of the PFLP, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. During the 1970s, this group of political terrorists had been involved in hijacks across the world and had a history of murder.
They were fanatically committed to their cause and they were wanting to see this through to the end.
If you comply with our instructions...
One of the most dangerous terrorists in the PFLP is leading the hijack. He calls himself Captain Marta Mahmoud.
The leader, Mahmoud, seemed to be really powerful within the group of four terrorists inside the aircraft, and he would destroy the aircraft or he would kill people in order to get his own way.
This 22-year-old fanatic is a formidable opponent.
Captain Mahmoud's real name was Zuhair Akache. He had grown up in the refugee camps in the Middle East, where he'd become radicalized. But he was also a clever man. He trained in aeronautical engineering in the UK, and he learned how to fly Cessna aircraft.
I said listen!
Mahmoud reads his demands to the Italian authorities. The PFLP want $15 million, the release from prison of 2 Palestinian terrorists, and 11 members of the notorious Baader-Meinhof group. These left-wing militants had embarked on a campaign of bombings, assassinations, and kidnappings within Germany. If these dangerous terrorists aren't freed, and all of Mahmoud's terms aren't met, his team will destroy the plane and kill all of the hostages. In Germany, the job of dealing with the crisis lands on the desk of Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, a minister in the German government.
Wisniewski had a number of very difficult roles to fulfill. One was to negotiate with all the countries in which the aircraft landed and to gain approval for armed action if necessary. The other, of course, was to negotiate with the terrorists, and the key point was buy time. The more time you had, the more space you had in which to act.
With 87 hostages' lives at stake, there's no time to waste. One of the first calls Wisniewski makes is to Germany's elite special forces team, GSG-9.
GSG-9 is a law enforcement SWAT team that are highly trained. They're trained in diving, they're trained in parachuting, coming out of helicopters, fast roping. They're trained in sniper operations, and of course, close quarters combat.
GSG-9, cracking force. You know, they ain't going to be fluffy about things. They're going to get on with the mission and sort it.
GSG-9 were born out of one of the darkest days in post-war German history. September the 5th, 1972, the Munich Olympics. Palestinian terrorists take Israeli athletes hostage. The German police launch a rescue raid, but it goes badly wrong. All of the hostages are killed. GSG-9, a specialist anti-terrorist unit, is created just 6 months later, so the same mistakes aren't made again. The new team is led by 48-year-old Ulrich Wegener.
Colonel Wegener was the driving force behind GSG-9. He had some experience working with the British SAS, also had experience working with Israeli special forces groups, and he was able to take a lot of that knowledge and create this souped-up SWAT team that primarily focused on anti-terrorism.
Wegener immediately realizes that attacking the hijacked plane will be an extremely difficult mission. He puts in a call.
Davies.
Barry Davies has spent years training with Britain's crack troops, the SAS.
The SAS had decided to set up counter-terrorist teams, and that had already been done some years before. We practiced on aircraft. Assaults were the big one, you know, how quickly you can get in from a starting point to actually closing with the terrorist and saving the hostages.
The SAS have pioneered new techniques and equipment to deal with plane hijacks. Critically, they have experience dealing with terrorists in Malaya and Northern Ireland.
The SAS were world leaders in counter-terrorism. And I guess GSG-9 thought, yeah, let's have an observer team on board to see, you know, if they can help us out.
Within hours of the Germans' request, Davies and one of his SAS colleagues prepare to fly out and join the assault team. In Rome, the hijacked plane takes off after being refueled by the Italian authorities. On board, Mahmoud forces pilot Jürgen Schumann to fly towards the Middle East, looking for somewhere new to land.
Captain Schumann has to pilot the aircraft to destinations that hadn't been planned, destinations that are refusing him entry, and all the while with a gun at his head and the threat of the aircraft being destroyed.
The plane flies from Rome to Cyprus. It is then denied landing rights in Beirut, Damascus, and Baghdad. It's allowed a 1.5-hour stop in Bahrain before being forced to fly on to Dubai. It's been over 15 hours since the hijack began. For now, flight LH-181 is allowed to stay on the runway in Dubai. The passengers endure stifling heat, hunger, and dehydration.
It was a pressure cooker inside the aircraft.
The terrorists eventually allow food and water on board, but the conditions inside continue to deteriorate. Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, the politician in charge of the operation, flies into Dubai and begins negotiations with the government there.
The politicians behind the scenes have to make sure that it's okay to bring another country's special operations force into a host country and conduct a mission. I mean, that takes delicate political maneuvering to be able to get that accomplished.
But Wisniewski cannot convince the Dubai authorities to allow the main GSG-9 team in to carry out the rescue mission. They insist on using local troops who don't have any specialist training. Only Wegener and 2 other GSG-9 officers are allowed to land. The rest of the GSG-9 team remain grounded. But there is some good news. The Dubai authorities do allow the 2-man British unit in to join Wegener.
We got on a plane, flew to Dubai. We then introduced ourselves to Wegener. We started talking, and it was like meeting a long-lost brother.
Wegener and Davies immediately start to plan for the attack. First, they need to know exactly what they're up against.
Gathering intelligence on the enemy is critical.
You need to know how many there are. You need to know what type of weapons they've got. Have they got explosives?
Your intelligence will be able to help you decipher who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
On the plane, Captain Schumann takes an extraordinary risk. He seems to take a routine cigar break and throws the packet onto the runway.
He dropped the pack outside, and somebody had had the foresight to pick it up.
It might not seem like much, but it contains vital intelligence for Wegener. Inside the packet, Wegener finds 4 cigars. They are a pre-arranged coded message between Lufthansa pilots and Germany's security forces.
There were 4 in the pack, 2 of them were broken, which indicated there were 2 men and 2 women, and this was correct.
Thanks to Schumann, Wegener now knows exactly how many terrorists he's up against. On the runway, the plane's air conditioning unit stops working.
They were on the tarmac where it's 120 degrees. Terrorists are tired, passengers are tired, thirsty, you name it. Highly stressed on that plane.
The toilets were overflowing, passengers were vomiting, they were passing out. So the interior of the aircraft becomes an incredibly hostile place to be.
The airport authorities try to get the plane's air conditioning system running, but they pump fuel into the wrong tank. It forces the terrorists to open the plane's doors for fresh air. It's another intelligence opportunity for Wegener.
They revealed themselves to photographers who took pictures of them. This helped GSG-9 to identify them so that when they got on the aircraft they could see exactly who were the terrorists and who were the civilians.
The terrorists' distinctive Che Guevara t-shirts mark them out as clear targets. It's a start, but Wegener is a long way off being ready to go. The assault team don't have all the specialist kit they need for the attack, and nor do the army in Dubai.
We made a list of kit and what we needed. Ladders, shotguns, pistols, and everything else we really wanted. Masking tape, hacksaws.
The authorities in Dubai may not have all the equipment to hand, but they do have one thing: money.
We then had 2 quartermasters with so much money you could choke a camel. And all they did was just go back into town and buy whatever we needed.
Once the equipment arrives, the team goes to work. They saw off shotguns so they're easier to use in a confined space. They spray equipment black so it won't reflect light. Even the ladders are adjusted for the height of the hijacked 737.
And we got to work getting people sawing the ladders to the right length. There's a manual actually on what length the ladders have to be for what type of aircraft.
Although most of the tools the team have to hand are low-tech, Barry has brought along a new SAS weapon that's cutting edge.
We developed a lot of quite exciting assets to help us. One of them was the stun grenade.
The stun grenades create a series of flashes and loud bangs.
Best way to describe it, if you go to disco sometimes and they flash the blue lights and everybody seems to move in a sort of jerky way, well, if you can imagine that with a high explosive in between each jerk, and that disorientated the terrorist enough so you could close with them.
The aim is to create a moment of confusion that will allow Wegener's team to board the plane.
Stun grenade back then was the latest technology, absolutely invaluable as a distraction, absolutely ideal in aircraft.
Flight LH-181 has been in Dubai now for over 2 days.
Get your passports out.
Worryingly for Wegener, Mahmoud is becoming more unhinged. He goes through the hostages' passports, identifying those he thinks are Jewish.
This could have ominous implications for certain passengers should Mahmoud decide to start executing people.
At times, he delivers lectures on Palestinian politics. One is over an hour long.
A scarcely coherent rant, and he gets so fired up by this speech that he ends up discharging his gun. This is just one example of how his mental state is deteriorating as the hijack goes on.
At the other end of the airfield, a replica 737 has been commandeered. Wegener's team of GSG-9, SAS, and local Dubai Defence Force troops now use it to rehearse the assault.
My task was to train a team to actually take over the aircraft.
Because the squad hasn't worked together before, Barry goes back to basics.
So we had a team. I explained exactly what we're going to do, and we would do it as simple as possible. And the idea was to go in through the 2 emergency hatches either side, get past the passengers, into the aisle. 1 2-man team would go forward, 1 2-man team would go to the rear, killing everything in his way until we got control of the aircraft.
Barry walks each person through the drill.
I choked each person on the back, and when I said go, you go there. When I said do this, they went there, and that's how it worked. When you actually start training and you've done it, the drill for 5 or 6 times, then you can do it without being instructed. So we just honed on everything then, looking to do it quicker. Eventually, they knew exactly what to do.
After hours of training, the team are ready. Wisniewski finally gets the clearance for the raid from the authorities.
And we had a green light to go that night, and we would have taken them out that night.
The assault team make their final preparations.
You just had the feeling it was going to go.
But then...
we saw the plane taken off. And then we were told that the plane had just left on its own accord. We actually thought it was over. I mean, there was a lot of disappointment. We thought we were going to return to UK.
Operation Fire Magic has suffered a major setback. On board flight LH-181, Mahmoud forces Captain Schumann to set a course south.
You are nothing about.
The hijacked plane leaves Dubai and heads towards the country then known as South Yemen, and its capital city, Aden. During the 3-hour flight, the terrorists reveal a terrifying surprise.
The terrorists took on board with them about 2 kilos of plastic explosive. They rig the aircraft, making it effectively into a flying bomb. One press of a button, the whole aircraft could be destroyed.
If that wasn't bad enough, another crisis looms as the plane nears South Yemen. Captain Schumann is refused permission to land.
The runway in Aden had been blocked.
The radio commands say you cannot land here.
But flight LH-181 is running on empty, and there are no airports nearby.
Schumann, however, knows he has no choice. The fuel is exceptionally low.
Without permission, Schumann decides he's going to land on a rough strip next to the main runway. Its soft, sandy surface could cause the plane to flip when it touches down.
This is a rough landing. They are braced for disaster.
Schumann makes it. His passengers are safe for now. But it's only a temporary relief. The Yemeni authorities want flight LH-181 straight back into the air. Schumann is worried his plane isn't airworthy after the emergency landing. He wants to go outside and inspect it.
Yes, you can!
Incredibly, Mahmoud consents to this. Being an aeronautical engineer, he understands that the undercarriage needs to be in sound condition.
Schumann checks underneath the plane. He finds no serious damage, but he still has no fuel and needs to speak to the Yemeni authorities.
Crucially, without Mahmoud's permission, he walks across the runway and goes to the Aden control tower to talk with officials there.
Mahmoud thinks Schumann is escaping and is incensed. The airport authorities don't want to get involved. Schumann is forced to go back to his plane.
I warned you. Why did you defy?
Mahmoud turns on him.
A terrible silence fell over the aircraft after the shot, and people knew that the situation was changing into a dramatic new sphere.
Whether Mahmoud intended it or not, by murdering Schumann, there's now little hope of a negotiated settlement.
When you kill an innocent person, they just change the dynamics of the game, and now the mission is going to happen. You know, it's going to happen. There's no doubt in any of the team members' minds it's going to happen. It probably needs to go sooner than later.
There was a total mood change with everybody. From now on, we follow them to the end of the earth.
But for now, the GSG-9 team have to wait. The authorities in South Yemen refuse them permission to enter their country. After 10 hours on the ground, the Yemenis want the plane gone and flight LH-181 is refueled and on the move again. Mahmoud now forces co-pilot Jürgen Vietor to set a new course. This time, flight LH-181 flies from the Middle East to Africa. Its destination, Mogadishu. It is the capital city of the country then known as the Somali Democratic Republic, a stable regime with good relations with the West. In the early morning, the plane touches down at Mogadishu Airport. Captain Schumann's body is unceremoniously dumped on the tarmac. Mahmoud begins negotiations with Somali police and German embassy staff. What they hear alarms them.
Mahmoud's mental state has completely deteriorated.
So you have tired terrorists that you're dealing with, and people can start dying really fast.
He's becoming increasingly unstable as the minutes go by.
Mahmoud sets a new ultimatum. If his German and Palestinian comrades are not released, and the $15 million not delivered by 3 o'clock that afternoon, the plane and everyone in it will be blown up. Shortly afterwards, a plane carrying Colonel Wegener, Barry Davies, and a small military team touches down. Hans-Jürgen Wisniewski, the politician, is also on board with the negotiating team. He pleads with Mahmoud for an extension to his deadline. Even if he could secure the release of the prisoners, there is not enough time to get them from Europe to Mogadishu before the time limit expires.
Wisniewski's negotiations with Mahmoud became increasingly fraught as the hijacking went on.
Mahmoud decides to show he means business. With half an hour to go before his deadline expires, he prepares to incinerate the aircraft and its occupants.
What they did do was use the duty-free alcohol, and they poured alcohol over them so they burn quickly. And they actually told them that's what they were doing it for. The people inside the aircraft got the feeling that they were getting close to the end.
Now! Comms, now!
Gabby Dillman, one of the cabin crew, relays a message to the team in the control tower. Feeling abandoned by the German government, it is a desperate farewell.
We know this is the end, and that we shall die. Many of us are too young to die. Still, it is better to die than to live in a world where human lives count for so little. I hope it will be quick.
She makes a heartfelt plea for their lives, but also there's a very bleak note to it. She mentions at one point, "We know that this is the end and we shall all die."
Wisniewski realizes he's out of time and adopts a high-risk strategy. He lies to Mahmoud and tells him exactly what he wants to hear.
They were being talked to and told that they'd won, and told them they could have the money, and told them they could actually talk to their friends who had been released from jails in Germany and would be on an aircraft and they could talk to them very soon. All these things gave them some hope that they were going to win and they were going to live.
Wisniewski's gamble works. Mahmoud believes his comrades have been released. he extends the deadline by 10 hours to give them time to be flown to Somalia. Wisniewski and the Special Forces team now have until 2:30 the following morning to launch the attack.
Very difficult situation.
Now Wisniewski asks the Somali government to let the rescue raid go ahead.
We were told to wait until we were cleared. Wisniewski had talked to the Prime Minister there and promised them all sorts of aid and weapons, and that did the trick.
The Somalis agree to the raid, but like in Dubai, they insist that local soldiers are involved as well. But this time, the full GSG-9 contingent of 60 highly trained operatives are allowed into Somalia. GSG-9's commander, Ulrich Wegener, goes to work straight away on the revised plan.
The plan in Mogadishu was a more elaborate plan than we'd had in Dubai. In Mogadishu, we had full team there, and we opened all doors simultaneously and the wings. So we had multiple entry points just in case somebody got blocked up.
Wegener's plan is that his team will approach the aircraft from its blind spot, the rear. They'll position assault ladders against the aircraft's fuselage at 6 entrance points. Somali troops will set off an explosion 300 meters away as a distraction. At the same time, stun grenades will disorientate the enemy long enough to allow Wegener's men in. Once through the doors, the team will systematically move through flight LH-181 until it is cleared of the terrorists. It's an ingenious plan, but even so, this mission is full of risk.
It is a bad target to attack because you can't predict what the terrorists are going to do in such a confined small area with so many people on board.
An hour before Mahmoud's deadline expires, Wegener's assault team form up at the end of the runway. Separately, GSG-9 snipers have moved into concealed positions around flight LH-181. They radio Wegener's team with information about the position of the hijackers within the aircraft.
They told us that the blinds were down and coast was clear. And in one big line, we walked towards the rear of the aircraft because there's a blind spot on the aircraft.
The team have to cross hundreds of meters of runway without being seen or heard.
Unfortunately, as we were walking towards the aircraft, the big searchlights which light up the old airfield, throwing shadows at least 30 meters long. And if you'd looked out the window, you'd have seen this line of shadows coming towards you.
Fortunately for Wegener's men, Wisniewski's negotiating team distract the terrorists by keeping them busy close to the radio at the front of the aircraft.
We knew exactly where Mahmoud was. He was in the cockpit. The Somalis were talking to Mahmoud and saying, "You've won, my brother. I have just had news from Germany. They have released the friends. They are on a plane. They're in the air. In these 20 or 30 minutes, you can talk to them directly yourself. We have the money here. We can wheel it out in front of you, give you the 15 million. And, you know, please don't kill anybody because you've won, you've won."
The assault team makes it to the plane undetected. They gather under the fuselage in their designated squads and ready themselves for the assault.
The teams with the ladders put them against the wing and also against the doors, front and rear.
The team now scale the wings and get into their final positions.
We crouched up right up next to the body where they can't see you. If someone's looking out the window, if the window is open, they can't see you because there's that little gap of dead ground. Now you've got to be yourself really tight in there until you get the go.
On cue, the Somalis set off a huge explosion as a distraction.
It was an almighty bang, and I think a whole Bowser worth of petrol went up. It just lit the place up like daylight.
Mahmoud is stunned in the cockpit, unsure of how to react. It's now or never for the attack.
Ulrich Wegener was counting. He counted down from 10. And then you hear, stand by, go. I can tell you now, the adrenaline just jumps up right to 100%. I threw the first stun grenade over the cockpit, and I threw the second one right across the cabin. And there was a mighty flash and bang.
At that very second, the assault team tried to force the doors open.
These are 32-kilogram doors. They take a lot of force to open.
It's a blur, the door goes down.
And straight away they're inside with guns drawn.
When the GS9 went in, they were shouting Hinlegen, get your head down basically, stay down, stay down.
They were able to get the hostages' heads down and start attacking the terrorists.
Wegener's men come face to face with their first terrorist. She is gunned down, falling to the ground, severely wounded. They have to move fast. The plane is still rigged with explosives.
The GSG-9 team fight with complete ruthlessness. They have to take out these people and stop them with excessive force.
Another terrorist advances. In his hands are 2 grenades.
These are deadly moments. If the hand grenades go off, the whole aircraft could be wrecked. But GSG-9 officers have only one choice.
One of the grenades, with its pin pulled, falls from the terrorist's hand. The stewardess, Gabby Dillman, is hit in the foot, and another passenger is wounded. But GSG-9 have had a lucky escape.
It wasn't a very good grenade. I mean, I think they were quite weak. I think most of it absorbed by the seating.
GSG-9 must take down the 2 other terrorists before it's too late. As one team moves forward, another tries to get the passengers off the plane as quickly as possible.
They were screaming to get the passengers out, and they started coming out in their droves. Initially, the people that come out the back door, which I could see, they were trying to slide down the ladder.
At the front of the aircraft, GSG-9 slowly advance and corner the most dangerous terrorist in the group, Captain Mahmoud.
Mahmoud is in the cockpit area, and he's opened fire with a handgun. He staggers back into the cockpit. He's still dangerous, reaching for a hand grenade.
3 of the cell are now out of action, but there's still 1 terrorist missing.
There are still explosives on the aircraft, there are still weapons, there's still a dangerous individual.
The missing terrorist is a woman, but where is she? Could she be hiding amongst the passengers? Wegener's men have to treat everyone as a potential suspect.
The GSG-9 team have to find her, and find her quickly.
Inside the plane, the hunt for the missing terrorist continues.
They heard the person in there.
She's been hiding in the toilet. The fourth and final terrorist is taken out. The mission is over. 7 minutes after bursting into the plane, Wegener radios in the code word, springtime. All of the terrorists are either dead or wounded, and the hostages are safely off the plane. Operation Fire Magic has been a complete success.
Everybody was really elated. We were all patting ourselves on the back and saying how good we were, and we were really pleased.
Wisniewski can breathe a sigh of relief. The politicians' tireless negotiations have played a crucial part in the mission's success. As the hostages have their first taste of freedom for 6 days, the one surviving terrorist, Suhaila Sayeh, is stretchered off the plane, defiant to the end.
The moment they got Suhaila out, which they thought was dead, she was very much alive, and they put her on a stretcher, and she put her hands up in the air and 2 fingers and shouted, "Free Palestine."
Later that morning, the team whose bravery and expertise had bought 86 hostages their freedom flies back to Germany.
And I didn't realize Lufthansa carried so much alcohol, and we made really good friends with the GSG-9 on that time coming back.
Wegener and his team land in Germany to a hero's welcome. Operation Fire Magic is a massive blow against the morale of the PFLP and its terrorist allies.
The mission in Mogadishu sent a message out to the terrorist world that they no longer held all the cards. The German authorities could say now that we are in control and that we can get back at terrorists if they try to strike at us.
When the news of GSG-9's success broke, 3 of the 11 Baader-Meinhof prisoners that Mahmoud had demanded be released commit suicide in prison. In the following years, Special Forces teams around the world study Operation Fire Magic as the textbook hostage rescue from a hijacked plane.
The GSG-9 mission would rank right up there with one of the most successful special operations missions in history because of everything kind of working together. The political side, the intelligence gathering side, negotiators, and the special operations drill that went pretty much flawless.
The operation in Mogadishu put GSG-9 on the map and gave them a deserved reputation for tactical excellence and for efficiency. And they built on that reputation ever since.
He is the master terrorist, behind dozens of murderous attacks on innocent civilians.
His hands are covered with Jewish blood. As far as Israel is concerned, he was an arch-terrorist.
There is no choice but to take him out. Tasked with the operation is Israel's elite special forces unit.
Sayeret Matkal is nothing short of legendary or mythical.
But with their target hiding in an enemy nation 1,500 miles from Israel, this will be one of the most ambitious operations ever mounted.
You go in, you kill him, you go out. Perfect assassination.
This is the true story of the Sayeret Matkal mission to kill Abu Jihad. In the dead of night, 3 terrorists infiltrate the Israeli border.
This was a raid by Palestinians.
They armed themselves from a secret weapons cache that the PLO had in Egypt.
Carrying AK-47s, they evade the Israeli border patrols.
They crossed Israel's southern Negev desert.
Their presence remains a secret until when they reach a remote desert road. They hijack a passing car. Israeli intelligence receive reports about the car hijacking. They now know armed gunmen are on the loose inside Israel. But they have no idea what their target is.
This triggered an enormous security alert in southern Israel. Roadblocks were put up.
An hour later, the gunman's car is sighted approaching a high security area.
It was not far from Dimona, which is the site of Israel's nuclear reactor.
It becomes clear that the terrorists are planning to attack the Dimona reactor, Israel's most important military facility.
Yes, the one where Israel has nuclear weapons but has never admitted that they have nuclear weapons.
With the top-secret facility at risk, army units race to intercept the terrorists before they can reach their target. Realizing that Israeli forces are closing down on them, the Palestinians suddenly change their plans.
The group kidnapped a bus that was bringing workers from the Dimona nuclear reactor back home.
Some of the passengers manage to escape, but 11 are trapped. 10 are women. Israeli security forces surround the bus and try to negotiate with the terrorists. But the gunmen are not interested in negotiating. Then they turn their weapons on the hostages. Now, the security forces have to go in.
You know, from here, if you're not gonna respond, more people are gonna die.
First, they get into position. Then, they strike. In a matter of seconds, Israeli soldiers take over the bus, killing all 3 of the terrorists. But quick as they are not fast enough.
Three of the workers at the Dimona plant were killed.
2 of the victims are young mothers. It becomes known as the Mother's Bus Attack. Even in a nation used to terrorism, this is still a shocking act.
The Dimona bus attack was different from what was going on.
This one was such a horrific attack that targeted not only innocent people, but mothers and women. That really was the most raw nerve in Israel.
But even as the mourners gather, Israeli intelligence agencies have already identified the man behind the attack. The man they are after is Abu Jihad. In Arabic, Abu Jihad means father of the struggle. The Israelis know that this is a title used by a leading Palestinian commander.
Abu Jihad is a nom de guerre, like a lot of Palestinian names. His real name is Khalil al-Wazir.
Abu Jihad is the legendary militant commander of the PLO.
In the Palestinian organization, of course, he was admired as one of their top leaders.
He is the number 2 man in the Palestinian Liberation Organization and heads its military wing.
Abu Jihad was in charge of operations of al-Fatah.
Under Abu Jihad's command, al-Fatah have undertaken dozens of attacks on Israel.
He had organized and planned some quite significant Palestinian actions. Innocent people have been killed, often in brutal circumstances.
As far as Israel is concerned, he was an arch-terrorist.
Abu Jihad was a very dangerous man.
Abu Jihad is such a threat to Israel that for 20 years they have been trying to take him out.
The hunt for Abu Jihad was conducted throughout the years. There were numerous attempts on his life. All of them failed.
Israeli military intelligence first tried to kill Abu Jihad in Damascus with a car bomb. They missed. A decade later, the Israeli Air Force tried to kill him in an airstrike on Beirut. But again, he walked away. The mother's bus attack is proof that the master terrorist has reared his head once more. But the threat he poses may be worse than just terrorism. The Israelis believe that Abu Jihad is also behind the biggest challenge to their authority that they have ever faced. For 3 months, the Palestinian population of Israel has been in revolt.
There was this uprising against their rule. There were large crowds of people, often young people, throwing stones at Israeli forces. It had elements of an armed uprising.
Its military was in the West Bank dealing with a wide array of protest.
It has become known as the Intifada, the uprising. And Israel believes that the hand that controls it is Abu Jihad's.
He claimed responsibility for the outbreak of the Palestinian Intifada. He said, I was the one ordering the troops, ordering the demonstrators to go to the street.
Israel cannot allow the insurrection to continue.
The Intifada caused an enormous international damage to Israeli prestige worldwide.
They felt they have to get back at Abu Jihad. They felt that he couldn't be allowed to get away with that.
And the man who decides to deal with Abu Jihad is Yitzhak Rabin, Israel's Minister of Defense.
Yitzhak Rabin, who was basically leading the Israeli intelligence and security forces.
Rabin was quite a hardliner. He was a military man through and through.
His whole concept of peace was based on the fact that Israel had to be strong and it had to defend itself. He also believed very strongly in targeting those terrorists that were attacking Israelis.
Rabin decides that Israel must kill Abu Jihad. But immediately, Rabin faces a problem. Abu Jihad is a long way from Israeli shores. Israeli intelligence have traced Abu Jihad to Tunis, North Africa, 1,500 miles from Israel. The city has become the new headquarters for the Palestinian Liberation Organization.
That was the place where the PLO headquarters was, far away from Israel on the coast of Africa.
Abu Jihad and other key Palestinian leaders have homes in a quiet suburb of the Tunisian capital.
He lived with his family in a villa in a beachside neighborhood of Tunis.
Being so far away from Israel, Abu Jihad felt quite confident and safe. He didn't think that Israeli intelligence would be able to get so far, so remotely from Israel.
But he is wrong. Abu Jihad is already under the watchful eye of Israel's intelligence service, Mossad.
These people are followed, these people are tracked. They knew where he was.
Israel's intelligence agency carried out surveillance of the area of Tunis where Abu Jihad was living along with other PLO leaders.
Four days after the mother's bus attack, Rabin orders Mossad to come up with a way to kill Abu Jihad. Initially, the agency is confident that they can do it themselves.
They told Defense Minister Rabin that they could come up with an operational plan to assassinate Abu Jihad in Tunisia within 30 days.
Mossad come up with various alternatives for killing Abu Jihad.
By a sniper. By exploding his car. By planting a booby trap, explosive where he was driving from his house to his office. By poisoning him. By firing rockets on his house. All sorts of possible operations.
But Rabin rejects them all. None of these options guarantee that Abu Jihad will be killed. With the Intifada raging, they simply cannot afford to miss. As far as Rabin is concerned, there is only one way to ensure success: to kill him at point-blank range.
It was decided that Abu Jihad is going to be killed in his house.
But killing the PLO's military commander in his home, 1,500 miles from Israel, will be no easy task.
Far harder to target somebody in Tunis than in somewhere that is, 20 minutes flying time or just across one of Israel's borders.
And so at the end of the day, Mossad came to Yitzhak Rabin and said, "We are not able to do this alone."
Skilled assassins as they are, getting a hit team inside Abu Jihad's house without being discovered is beyond even the Mossad. So Rabin now calls upon a highly secretive Special Operations Brigade, famed for their ability to strike at Israel's enemies wherever they may try to hide.
When Israel wants to strike, Israeli leaders turn to a special unit of the Israeli military.
The immediate candidate to perform the assassination is the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit.
But in Israel, they are known by another name. In English, they are known as the unit, but in Hebrew, they call them the Sayeret Matkal.
Sayeret Matkal in Israel is nothing short of legendary or mythical. It's essentially the top unit in the army.
It's the sort of byword for an elite unit. There are others, but that's the sort of crème de la crème.
It's a unit modeled after the British SAS. SEAL teams are similar to it, Delta Force is similar to it.
Like these other special forces units, the Sayeret Matkal are experts at killing people.
They're thought of as assassination specialists.
They're willing to sacrifice everything for their country.
Commandos train intensively in survival skills, marksmanship, and hand-to-hand combat.
Their job is to go on special operations that are considered beyond the scope of your regular troops.
Only the very best of the Israeli military are recruited into the Sayeret Matkal.
You're looking in elite unit for a person that in no time can concentrate and do the things fast. You're looking for a person that will never give up on himself.
These men have the reputation for accomplishing things, getting things done.
That reputation was cemented by a legendary operation that took place in 1976. Terrorists hijack an Air France plane with more than 100 Israeli and Jewish civilians on board. The plane is diverted to the Ugandan capital, Entebbe. When Uganda's dictator, Idi Amin, decides to cooperate with the terrorists, Israel calls on the Sayeret Matkal.
The unit Sayeret Matkal took something like a few weeks to train on the model of the aeroplane, to fly to Entebbe and to give the right solution for the incident.
That solution is for the Sayeret Matkal commandos to disguise themselves as members of the Ugandan army. Once on the ground, the unit strikes.
They went in there, did a counter-terrorist mission over 1,000 miles from home, killed the terrorist, got out of there alive.
102 hostages were rescued and returned to Israel, with only 3 civilian casualties.
That lightning raid, of course, became legendary.
And that was the beginning of their reputation as being a hardcore unit.
Rabin believes there is no other unit better suited for the task of taking out Abu Jihad. So he puts in a call to a man who had been one of the architects of the Entebbe mission. He is Israel's most decorated soldier and a living legend, Ehud Barak.
Ehud Barak was head of Sayeret Matkal, one of the most famous commanders of Sayeret Matkal.
He was in a position then as being a chief of staff or head of military intelligence.
Very serious guy, very smart guy, very sharp guy, very decorated guy.
Rabin orders Barak to draw up a plan for the Sayeret Matkal to assassinate Abu Jihad. It will be known as Operation Show of Force. Now Barak demonstrates one of the hallmarks of the Sayeret Matkal, meticulous planning. The key will be finding out as much as he can about conditions on the ground.
They, more than anybody, know the importance of intelligence and good intelligence.
Despite the distance, if everything was carefully looked at in advance, there was a reasonable chance that they could be able to get away with it.
First, Barak has Mossad send more agents to Tunisia. Previously, Mossad had been simply keeping tabs on Abu Jihad. Now they are tasked with gathering detailed information on his every movement.
The Mossad sent people into Tunisia, posing as either tourists or business people, very routine again for the Mossad.
They were sent to Tunisia to check all various questions that came from Sayeret Matkal.
Posing as Lebanese Arabs, the new team liaise with the agents already embedded in Tunis. The agents monitor Abu Jihad's journeys around the city.
The Israeli intelligence was updated of the tiniest details of Abu Jihad daily routine and daily schedule.
The agents listen in on telephone calls to his home.
The Mossad would use electronic means to intercept communications and listen in, so they were confident that they would know when Abu Jihad is at home.
Watching and listening to his every move, the Mossad team soon learn the vital information that Barak needs to launch his operation.
Who is in the house with Abu Jihad? How the house is built? Who is sleeping in each room? How many guards? How far is the police station?
They know the height of the perimeter walls, the types of windows, doors, and locks, the distance between the rooms. They soon know every aspect of the villa's defenses.
They know exactly where he is and on what floor of the building and when he goes to sleep and when he comes and when he goes and where his bodyguard's going to be, etc.
Armed with the intelligence from Mossad, back in Israel, Barak begins to draw up plans for the operation.
And so Sayeret Matkal was starting to plan how to take out Abu Jihad.
The plan Barak develops is to send in a small team of commandos to assault the villa under cover of darkness. But it will only work if it is carefully choreographed.
The preparation and planning is the most important thing in a mission for the Special Forces soldier or the Special Forces unit.
They construct their plan using the detailed Mossad intelligence.
And they built a small model, which is an exact copying of the house.
Barak marks out the guard posts and points of entry.
They get all their intelligence together, and then they have to figure out the best route in to that target.
Different strategies for the assault are debated in order to minimize the risk of failure.
The soldiers are smart and they have a lot of experience, and if they have a good idea, then the idea is taken and the plan is changed.
Once this is agreed, the commandos mark out the exact footprint of the villa and practice the assault again and again.
That was something that Israeli intelligence and the Sayeret Matkal commandos frequently did. They never wanted to leave anything to chance.
Like every other secret or special operation, you should train. Train for the exact steps, for the exact performance of yourself and others and so on. But expect the unexpected.
The next stage is to practice the mission in real conditions.
Sayeret Matkal asked few people to donate a house in Israel not far away from the beach for rehearsals. House is quite similar to that of Abu Jihad.
And again practice the assault in Israel before embarking on the mission.
Whilst the commandos are practicing for the assault on the villa, Barak turns his attentions to one outstanding issue. That means getting the commando unit the 1,500 miles to Tunisia, safely and secretly.
All arms of Israeli power would be involved here. The Mossad, the military intelligence, the Navy, the Air Force.
Barak mobilizes the entire Israeli military. First, the Navy will take the commandos from Israel to Tunisian waters in missile boats.
It was a huge armada of ships, airplanes, cargo ships, carrying helicopters.
Above them, Barak orders the Air Force to be ready with an emergency evacuation plan.
Sayeret Matkal is under the coverage of the Air Force in order to be evacuated if something really bad happens.
It is an almost unprecedented mission in its size and ambition.
This was a huge operation. Thousands of soldiers and intelligence officers from the Navy, Mossad, military intelligence.
Having arranged how to get the commandos to Tunisia, Barak now focuses on a very particular problem. The nearest landing beach is 2.5 miles from the villa. This presents him with two problems.
The first is how to get Sayeret Matkal to the house. And the second was how to get them back safely and alive after the assassination.
How can Barak get the team through the Tunisian streets without them being detected by either the Palestinians or the Tunisian police?
Bear in mind, Tunisia is an Arab country and not a democratic state. It's a sort of a police state far away from Israel.
They have to get there quickly without drawing attention. So they need an insertion plan.
So Barak comes up with an ingenious method to get the commandos to and from the villa without being detected. First, they will arrange a distraction to clear the area of police.
We're expecting local forces to intervene. So you give a notice to the police, the local police, that something happens far away on the other side of the city. So everyone is concentrated there. You have time to go.
Next, the Mossad agents on the ground will rent cars and drive them to the beachfront. There they will collect the commandos and ferry them to a location near to the villa.
Those rented cars were placed on the beach in Tunis to make sure that no suspicions would be aroused.
The Mossad agents will park the cars near Abu Jihad's home, but the commandos will have to walk the final few yards to the villa on foot. This is when they will be most exposed. To get them the last few hundred yards, Barak turns to his own experiences. "15 years earlier, Barak was involved in one of the most remarkable missions in the history of the Sayeret Matkal. The unit was sent into Beirut, the heart of enemy territory. They were sent to kill the men behind the slaughter of 11 Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics. To infiltrate the city undetected, Barak and the others employed a very unusual disguise.
Some of them are dressed as women in order not to distract attention that just a group of men is walking in the street. It's always easier to have men and women together.
Their disguises allowed the unit to disperse through the city undetected and launch multiple synchronized attacks. At the end of that operation, 15 known terrorists were dead. Now Barak's team will play the same trick in Tunisia in order to get to Abu Jihad's villa undetected.
The Israelis felt that they could do that even in Tunisia, even 1,500 miles away. So that playbook was turned to once again.
This leaves Barak with one final decision: to choose the man to lead the mission. He chooses Nahum Lev, the deputy chief of the Sayeret Matkal.
Nahum Lev, his deputy, one of the most brave and legendary figures and different figures in the history of Sayeret Matkal to lead the operation.
Having read all the available intelligence, Lev declares that Abu Jihad is a dead man walking.
He said, you know, I read the file on Abu Jihad. I knew how many Jews, how many brother Israelis he killed. I knew that his hands are covered with Jewish blood. He deserved to die.
Lev's task is to be the first man into the villa and to locate Abu Jihad. Lev and his men now embark on the 1,500-mile journey to Tunisian waters. The quarter-century chase for Abu Jihad is almost over. At a military base south of Tel Aviv, a specially adapted passenger jet takes off bound for Tunisia.
The Israelis used an electronic warfare aircraft, a converted Boeing.
Barak will command the operation from the plane, which has been turned into a flying control center. A few hours later, the plane reaches Tunisian airspace. Barak now orders the Mossad team to the beach.
The Mossad was waiting with the rented cars by the shore, waiting for the Sayeret Matkal people to come ashore.
With the Mossad agents in place, the order is given for the Sayeret Matkal to land. They are taken ashore by members of Flotilla 13, Israel's Navy SEALs. To minimize sound, commanders row the last few hundred meters to shore.
The Israelis landed in the dead of night. They were picked up by the Mossad people. Nobody was there when it came to Tunisian security.
Immediately, the commandos change into their tourist disguises.
They're all changing very quickly. They change their clothes to civilian clothes. Some of them are dressed as women. The whole group, Mossad, Flotilla 13, and Sayeret Matkal are waiting at the beach for the final go-ahead.
As they wait for a green light, the commandos learn from Barak that there's a problem. Israeli intelligence have intercepted a phone call to Abu Jihad.
Someone from the PLO headquarters called Abu Jihad and said that they were warned by apparently a European intelligence service that the Israelis are thinking of killing a PLO senior figure.
Barak's fear is that if Abu Jihad suspects he might be the senior figure being targeted, he may flee Tunis immediately.
The Israelis were quite afraid that he's going to take this threat seriously.
Barak demands a report from the Mossad team watching the villa. Is Abu Jihad at home, or has he fled Tunis? The agents report that his Mercedes has been seen arriving at the villa, but they cannot confirm that Abu Jihad was in the car.
They saw people going out of Abu Jihad house and getting into the house, but they didn't see their face.
While Barak waits to find out where Abu Jihad is, he orders the Mossad agents at the beach to take the Sayeret Matkal to their position near the villa.
Quite rapidly, they launched the force, the Sayeret Matkal force, from the beach to Abu Jihad house.
At about 1 o'clock in the morning, the three vehicles that contained the Israeli commandos went into this neighborhood called Sidi Bou Said. One vehicle containing 8 Israeli commandos actually went to the front of the house.
But Barak still cannot order the commandos to launch their assault.
Even after forces left the beach and went on to the house, we still did not have the right assurance to go in.
They were waiting there for the final approval of the commanders of the operation that Abu Jihad is indeed at home.
These are the actual words from secret radio communications between the units as they wait for the order to proceed.
Bogart, this is Richard. I want to tell you it is possible that there are some people who are not sleeping in the opens. Okay, Richard, I understand.
They use code names and speak in English instead of Hebrew, in case anyone is listening.
Israeli commandos were sitting with their Uzi submachine guns and pistols between their legs, just waiting for the signal to proceed.
Without absolute certainty that the target is at home, Barak cannot give the order to strike.
They assured the Minister of Defense that they will know for sure that Abu Jihad is in the house before launching the assault.
It is now that Barak shows the Sayeret Matkal's real quality. He has a backup plan.
Israel is famous for being adjustable. We change views, we change our behavior, we change actions according to time and persons involved. That's elite unit.
A few days previously, Barak had ordered an operation in the Palestinian territories.
They raid a house in Gaza and arrest a distant relative of Abu Jihad, a lawyer.
Now, in a secret underground basement in Tel Aviv, a call is made to Abu Jihad's villa using a specially diverted line.
Something that would look like a phone call from Italy to Abu Jihad's office in his home.
Making the call is an Israeli agent who pretends to be a Palestinian, informing Abu Jihad of his relative's arrest.
It was shouting and cursing, Abu Jihad, you must help. They have arrested Abu Rahma again. These son of a bitches, Zionists, they have arrested Abu Rahma and they are torturing him.
Then they hear the voice on the other end of the line.
The speaker says, who is this? Please calm down. We'll make sure everything is okay. We'll help Abu Rahma. Don't worry.
The agent has to keep the person on the phone talking. Listening in are 3 Arabic experts who have been trained to recognize Abu Jihad's voice.
Each one of them had to raise his right arm when he's 100% confident that this is Abu Jihad speaking from the other side of the line.
As the 3 soldiers listen to the voice, first one and then another raise their right hands into the air. Finally, the third hand is raised.
It was approved and confirmed and corroborated that Abu Jihad is in the house.
Finally, Barak can give the order to strike.
Bogart, this is Richard. You can leave the station. You can leave the station. Do it fast. I say it again, do it fast.
Lev, the commander of the operation, and another commando dressed as a woman begin the final approach to the villa. Disguised as a romantic couple, they walk through the busy streets.
Hidden in plain sight, nobody would think twice looking at these guys.
Their task, to approach the villa undetected and take out the guard on the gate.
So they were a pair walking the street carrying a chocolate box.
But the innocuous-looking chocolate box Lev carries actually conceals a gun.
They had a weapon hidden under a box of chocolates. It's not going to be in a holster, and it won't be slung around the neck.
Lev and his partner now approach the entrance to the villa, where the guard is sat in Abu Jihad's black Mercedes.
They got close to the driver of Abu Jihad that was still sitting in the car.
The woman distracts the guard by asking for directions.
They pulled out a map and they wanted to ask him some sort of tourist request.
As the guard looks over the map, Lev acts. Now the other commandos make their move.
The 8 commandos swiftly assaulted the house.
They went to the backyard and came to the door. It made some noise, and Abu Jihad heard it in the upper floor.
Lev and his accomplice concentrate on the stairs that will lead to Abu Jihad. The other team go to take out the remaining bodyguards. With the bodyguards dealt with, Lev and his partner close in on the main target.
One of the assassins of Sayeret Matkal was going up the stairs, a young officer of Sayeret Matkal who was chosen by Nahum Lev to be the first one to come in.
The commando hears someone at the top of the stairs. Is it Abu Jihad or an innocent member of his family? The commando knows that he will have to identify the target in an instant. The commando reacts instinctively.
And then other people from the unit came and shot Abu Jihad as well.
70 bullets hit Abu Jihad, and his right hand, which had held the pistol, was nearly severed.
But as they are firing, Abu Jihad's wife suddenly appears.
Scream, halas, halas, stop it, stop it. Don't you see that he's already dead?
But even with everyone's nerves on edge, discipline holds.
Even when the unexpected happened, the wife did not get hurt. We will avoid shooting even on the expense of getting hurt.
Instead, Lev orders her to face the wall. And with Abu Jihad confirmed dead, the commandos depart.
Once it was finished, they rushed into the cars, back to the beach, back to the boats, and
the entire operation has been accomplished in a matter of minutes.
At dawn, when Tunisian investigators and a PLO team went out to see what happened, all they found were the 3 rented vehicles and footprints on the sand.
As the commandos journey back to Israel, they know that even by their own high standards, Operation Show of Force is an outstanding achievement.
Abu Jihad, who as far as the Israelis were concerned was the main planner of the intifada they were out to stop, was dead.
But the mission hadn't been quite flawless. Despite all the intelligence gathered, there was something they had missed. At the time of the raid, Abu Jihad's gardener was sleeping in the basement of the villa. This innocent man had been killed alongside Abu Jihad's bodyguards. Soon news of the operation reaches Israel.
When the troops were on their way home, it was already published that someone killed Abu Jihad in his house.
Israel has never formally admitted to killing Abu Jihad, but there was never really any doubt about it.
But there is a strange twist to this tale. The news of Abu Jihad's death does not have the effect Rabin had hoped for.
It's all very well being clever at killing Palestinian leaders, but the PLO didn't disappear. The Intifada didn't stop.
In fact, the violence gets worse. News of Abu Jihad's death triggers the bloodiest day of protests since the Intifada began. And in a bizarre development, the Israelis learn that despite his claims, Abu Jihad had never had anything to do with the Intifada.
In fact, he was lying. He didn't know that the Intifada is going to break up, he or the PLO. And they sort of jumped on the wagon after it started, claimed responsibility for something that they had none involvement whatsoever in.
And the reaction of Israelis wasn't what Rabin had expected either.
There was quite a lot of comment in Israel that, well, this was a brilliantly executed mission by our boys. At the end of the day, did it make much difference in the big picture? Not really.
But one difference it did make was to the career of the man in charge of the operation, Ehud Barak.
It's hard to overstate what a legendary career he's had.
In the years after the Tunisian mission, Barak was made chief of the general staff. And in 1999, the Israeli people showed their admiration for the Sayeret Matkal when they elected this former leader of the unit to become Israeli prime minister.
The Israeli public, though it doesn't know much about precisely what Sayeret Matkal has done, well, the Israeli public knows that it's a trustworthy group of men who get things done.